Welcome to Songs of Hope and Center Home Groups. Really glad you've joined us today. A couple of quick announcements. First of all, this next Friday is our new podcast that Jacob and I have coming out. And we're going to talk about something that a lot of Christians think, I shouldn't have this. I'm not a real Christian if I have doubt in my life. We're going to talk about what it means to have doubts and how some of the great leaders throughout history of the scriptures and the Bible had doubts and overcame that by faith in God. Please join us at the end of the month, September 30th, for a pancake dinner youth fundraiser. And we'll have incredible food, pancakes for dinner that evening. And then right after that, at about 7:30, 7:45, our evangelism committee is putting on our yearly free outdoor movie night. This is a great time out by the shelter house where we're going to provide free candy, free drinks, and you just need to bring your chairs, your blankets. Hopefully it'll be a little bit cooler that time. And we're going to watch Despicable Me 4 that just comes out that week. Brand new movie. If you have not seen it, these two events are perfect for you to invite your friends, your neighbors, and you want to be there. Don't let me be there by myself. Have a great study. Just when you thought I'd given every story and example from me running and then failing in business, I've got one more for you. So I'm starting off today's talk at the beginning of my search for a new business. We had everything ready to go, and I was starting to look for equipment to buy that I needed for the restaurant. Well, there's a used restaurant equipment business just north of Shadeland, about I-70 on the east side. And I went in there, and I was telling the clerk, it was a large store, and I was telling the guy what I was doing. And he said, oh, yeah, I used to have a business of my own, a restaurant business. He said, you know you're going to fail in less than a year, right? I'm like, what? I know nothing about me, what I'm doing. You have no idea what I'm going to do. And I just thought, how bold of him, just not know me or anything about me. Now, he was right looking back, but he just knew how tough the restaurant business was. But right away, I saw my first opposition. People tell me, you're not going to succeed. I know when I was telling Cheryl in the very, very beginning, some of the ideas that I had, and looking back, she was probably right. I don't always like to admit that. But, one of the early ideas for his place, ice cream and coffee shop, was called 50 Acoustic Fish, meaning 50 different types of ice cream, acoustic, the acoustic music vibe, and fish being the sign for Christianity. And I thought it's unique. But she made a good point. She goes, people are going to assume it's some kind of a seafood restaurant. Point taken. Then problems with my builder throughout the building process in the beginning, even throughout, we had so many struggles, so many confrontations. It was tough. It's really tough when you want to accomplish something and people are talking bad against you, people are ridiculing you, people are putting up barriers for you being successful. Have you ever tried to accomplish a big project or accomplishment only to find people constantly telling you it will not work and trying to stop you along the way? This is where we once again gain incredible wisdom from Nehemiah. The last 2 weeks we have been in a series on Nehemiah on leadership. And remember how we talked about Nehemiah recognizing a need. He was distraught what was happening to Jerusalem, knowing how important this was to God. Well, then last week we see how Nehemiah was meeting the challenge. And today we're going to focus on chapters 3 and 4 and everyone doing their part. So we're going to look at the completion gained by unity. You see, in just 52 days, this is incredible. Within 52 days, Nehemiah and his recruits rebuilt the wall. Think about that. A 2.5-mile wall gets rebuilt in 52 days by people with no experience building walls. I could have done this. How great is that? So Nehemiah had a vision, and he gave all the people concrete and specific jobs near where they lived. So let's start with chapter 3 of Nehemiah. Elishab, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work to rebuild the sheep gates. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananiah. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zakur, son of Emir, built next to them. Then going on to verse 6, and just follow me along, because you're going to read the words, and I'm not exactly going to say them. Then the Jeshanov gate was repaired by so-and-so, son of so-and-so, and so-and-so's son of so-and-so. And they had its beams and its doors with their bolts and bars in place. And next to them, repairs were made by the men from Gibeon and Mizpah. And so-and-so of Gibeon and Jadon of so-and-so, places under the authority of the governor of Trans-Euphrates. There you go. Uzziah, son of so-and-so, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the neck section, and Hananiah, one of the perfume makers. Now, this isn't the same kind of perfume makers as bringing some Old Spice to the part. He was something a little bit different. Well, they made repairs next to that, and they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. So there's really three key points to this chapter. Number one, this chapter shows the need for believers to work together to accomplish something. You see, it pleases God to see his people working together in one accord, with one heart, with one mind. God will put us into situations where we must work together, and we have to learn how to lead, how to follow, how to work together with one heart and one mind. Number two, the work done was a reflection on the family. Almost everyone is mentioned as the son of somebody. And then number three, evidence of Nehemiah's leadership. You see, Nehemiah was an effective leader because he made each man accountable for his work. Each man had a section of the wall he was responsible for, and he was known as being responsible for it. No one wanted it to be seen that they were a poor worker in God's cause. So next we see threats overcome by boldness. In chapter 4, over the 52 days of building, Nehemiah documents 7 specific attempts to neighboring groups to distract him and resist his God-inspired mission. And if your mission is large enough, you will have resistance and distractions. So chapter 4 starts, when Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of the associates and the army of Samaria, he said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are?" Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "What are they building? Even a fox climbing on it would break down their wall of stones." And he's looking at it like, I'm building this. "Hear us, O God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back from their own heads," Nehemiah is saying. "Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders." So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half of its height, for the people worked with all of their heart. And then going on to verse 12. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, "Wherever you turn, they will attack us." They were worried about what was going to happen. Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And after I looked things over, I stood up and I said to the nobles and the officials and the rest of the people, "Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord." You see, Nehemiah is always pointing the people to God for guidance, not anybody else to look up to. And he goes, "Who is great and awesome? And fight for your families, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes." And then when our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each for their own work. And from that day on, half of the men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. Nehemiah had made an adjustment. They were there to protect the wall. They protect from the outsiders, but they had a building project, so he had to change in midstream there. So the officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did the work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore the sword by their side as he worked, but the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. I love what Steve Jobs of Apple once said. He goes, "I'm convinced that about half of what separates successful entrepreneurs from the non-successful ones is pure perseverance." Nehemiah was showing this. And speaking about accountability, here's a story about 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. So listen to this because it does get confusing. There was an important job to be done. Everybody was asked to do it. Everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody couldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. You get all that? You see, the story could be summarized in any number of ways. It certainly brings to life scenarios and phenomena that many people will experience on a regular basis throughout their work and other organizations. You see a lack of accountability. You see lack of ownership, lack of responsibility, finger pointing, blaming assigned everywhere. But that's where Nehemiah went above that. Nehemiah looked for God's guidance, prayed all the time for God's guidance, and he showed them the leadership that they needed. He was the servant leader that they could look up to and took accountability and spread that out throughout the entire camp. I love what the great Helen Keller explained about what she explains here. This quote really defines what Nehemiah accomplished so long ago in this story in Jerusalem. She goes, alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. Have a great week.
Like and subscribe.